have the honor of learning from Alex Mayfield about an ambitious database project at Boston University that centers on the history of Christianity in China. The project is led by Professor Eugenio Menagon, Dario Ireland, and Alex Mayfield. Today with us is Alex Mayfield. Alex is one of the principal investigators of the project and is a PhD student in history and hermeneutics in the School of Theology at Boston University. Alex, please.
Thank you, and thank you to the conference organizers, Professor Chen, Professor Rudolph, for inviting us to be part of this. We're really grateful to be here. I have a little time, so I kind of want to provide just a brief overview of the project, of the database itself, and give you some introduction to some of the tools to how you can explore it. So let me go ahead and just jump in and share my screen. So the China Historical Database really is it's a large, ambitious project, certainly, and it has a lot of possible uses. And one of the key main ones is network analysis. In fact, it's kind of built into the very structure of the database as kind of a primary way that we want people to engage the data. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce the database project more generally, talk about the data structure and size, and then introduce you to two platforms that we use. First, the Neo4j platform, which is the graph database platform we use. And then basically we've created an online platform that we'd like to kind of introduce to you, and that's still in development. So the project, the China Historical Database, really is intended to help scholars quantify and visualize the place of Christianity in China from 1550 to 1950, a broad period. And it does this by essentially recording Christian people, institutions, organizations, and events, both in relational data, people to institutions, people to people to events, but importantly also people to places and institutions to places. So we record geospatial data as well. So our approach is, we try to collect rich networked data as much as possible. And also another prong of our project is to create accessible data tools, because while we know that there are so many amazing things, as you've just seen, that people can do with data sets, there is a large hurdle for many humanists to kind of climb into that. And many institutions sadly don't really teach the required skills. So we also have a prong of our project is trying to create more accessible tools that people can use to at least begin exploring data, even in a pedagogical sense. And then lastly, we really depend on fostering East-West partnerships and partnerships just with anyone. So we work with universities. Currently I'm overseeing students in Washington, students in Italy, students in Australia, students in China working now. So we are really student-based. We have a lot of partnerships with institutions who are collecting data. And that's important because a lot of the data that we have is not digitized in a form that can be easily parsable. So we are having to go through digitized archives, which maybe have been recorded on microfilm or whatnot, but which essentially we can't use a computer to read, and so we have to collect it manually. So our website, you can find more information there, and I'll move on to kind of talk about our data. So our data structure, it has a few goals. First, we want our data to be flexible and parsable, right? Because Christianity, especially on both Catholic, Orthodox, and Protestant sides, existed in really multifaceted forms. And they talk about things in different ways, and they record things in different ways. So when we were creating our database, we wanted to create a structure that could both record those things, but also make queries themselves understandable, right? That we don't have to create Catholic queries and Protestant queries to understand data that it might be similar. So we tried to create a data structure that allows that data to exist, to capture the complexity of it, the multifaceted nature of it, but also be able and easy to parse. And so what we've done is we've created limited types or labels in the graph parlance, or Neo4j parlance. But we've given each of these types expansive properties. So people will have anywhere from, maybe just a few properties listed, from name, age, gender, to, multiple properties of alternate names, names, everything that we can collect based on the historical documents that we're using. And lastly, there's a sense of controlled geography, and this is to eliminate any sorts of redundancy that might cause errors in the way that we control, in the way that we record people's positions. So people tend to gain geography either through participation in events or locations at institutions, such as hospitals, churches, things like that. So this results in this sort of structure, which we have 5 major node types and then 7 relationship types, which then have subtypes which can be recorded. And currently, this is where our data kind of stands. This is mostly of our cleaned data, the data that in our first iteration. This is mostly coming from directories, necrologiums, other scholarly works that have kind of done some of this, and we've been working through them and trying to clean them. But I can tell you for right now, this is probably compiled about a month ago, and since then we've probably added a few thousand more names, a couple hundred more institutions, and things like that. So it is growing quickly, and we hope to. I'll talk about what we hope to do by the end of the year, at the end of the project, at the end of the presentation. So first, I'd like to introduce a tool that we use. So we have decided to allow our database to be a graph database, which is not typical of most databases that you can access online today. Many of them are going with SQL databases because this is really what most of the internet is built on. But graph databases are, as you can see, gradually gaining steam, especially in the tech industry and various other corporate enterprises. And so we decided to explore the idea of graph databases because graph databases, especially for humanists who maybe aren't used to thinking in the terms of databases, graph kind of eliminates a degree of abstraction, right? It represents, it's often, as you saw that in chart, it represents how we think about connections. So we really like that about it. And also, especially when we're looking at the Neo4j database, which is something I encourage everyone to explore if you haven't yet. I don't get paid for that. I just think it's a great tool. It's a great tool for exploring data because of the language cipher, which is instead of writing SQL queries or R queries, cipher is a much more intuitive way to explore data. And so, for instance, we can have, you can see, I can write a simple scheme database call that will give me the kind of schema, which is the much more condensed version of what I showed you, not as clean. But we also have what we can hear is kind of write a query for, I want to see connections to all people and institutions. I'm limiting it because we have far more than that, and that would take a long time. But it's essentially what you see is a visual based browser, which is a desktop. This is free to download, and you can begin to watch to construct simple queries and then depict them in graph database. You can also output JSONs, CSV files. You can output them in multiple forms. It's very easy to do that. But I think for people, especially who aren't used to graph databases or databases in general, this sort of intuitive nature is nice. It's a great learning tool and a great entry point for people. So this is the browser. This is currently our beta data, which is based only in Shanxi. And it's a little slightly different than what our final data will look like. We put this together a little bit of time ago, but it's a great way to explore this. There's actually a README that I've uploaded to the file with this data that will give you the scripts, a really small little script that you can kind of implement to get all this data up and running and explore it. So I really encourage you all to do that. Lastly, I wanted to talk about another platform that we can use. So we use Neo4j as kind of the native home for our database. We host it at BU, but it will be available for people to download in whatever format they need. But we've also created this, which is our online platform. And it's a way that people can begin to explore the data without having any sort of graph database experience. So for instance, this is a React JavaScript application. And it allows you to begin exploring the data in a more intuitive way. So for instance, I want to find out about Portuguese people who are Christians in China. I can begin to explore that data and get information about them. And then I can explore kind of in a social network way, all the different connections, right? This is like the nodes in the database. I'm just traveling along the nodes and seeing who else is connected. And you can do this in a geospatial way. You can get this in a list view. And then also, I think you can, and this is the tool I like most, is you can then create an ego network for individuals on the database. So, for instance, we're looking at Giulio Leni, a famous Jesuit, and we can begin to explore the different connections that this person has. It's a lot here. I'm going to limit this a bit. And we can create a quick ego network for Eleni and see who he's connected to, how through what institutions, etc. And this is a simple tool, right? You can do far more in powerful, software suites like Gephi, but this is a great place where students and non-digital humanist specialists can start and begin to understand the power and appeal of databases. And this data itself is derived from directories. It's derived from data that doesn't seem very deep, but when you start to put that together, you can then realize the rich kind of networked data that is available. So I know I threw a lot out there today. I just wanted to introduce this project, and I want to open up the floor now for questions, because I'm sure there's a lot about where we're getting our data, what it's doing, etc. But I'd love to have a conversation about it, and I would really encourage you to go to our website, read the white paper, play with our beta data, and by the end of the year, we're hoping to actually release our first major data set, which is focused on, missionaries and foreigners in China, although we do have a good selection, a cross-section of prominent Chinese people, but it's mainly focused on the modern period. And so we have, it's quite a number of people still, and we're hoping in later iterations to both get deeper data and more data on Chinese Christians, which we have some of, but again, we wanted to grow. So I'm opening up the floor now, and I'd love to hear from everyone.